Hi, everyone. We'll get started in just a minute while we wait for folks to trickle in from the waiting room. All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on advocacy essentials for nonprofits. Before we get started, I just want to quickly tell you a little bit about the Housing Alliance. We are a statewide coalition working to increase access to safe, decent, and affordable homes for all Pennsylvanians. Webinars are free for members, so become a member today. You can do that by visiting housingalliancepa.org/become a member, or you can contact us at info@housingalliancepa.org for more information. All right, just walk you through some logistics right here. Today's webinar will run approximately for 45 minutes, and that includes time for question and answer. We encourage you to leave questions for our two incredible speakers today. If you do want to ask the presenters a question, please use the Q&A function. You can find that at the bottom of your screen. The chat function is only to ask the Housing Alliance staff logistical questions about the webinar. So once again, if you want to ask questions if you want to leave questions to the presenters, please use the Q&A function. I also want to talk to you about some upcoming webinars that we have. We have a webinar that is a policy update on limited access to eviction records and unsheltered homelessness. That will be on Thursday, February 12th from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. You can scan the QR code on the screen that will take you to our events page, or you can just visit the website, housingalliancepa.org, and then go to the events page from there. And that is it from me. Thank you to Jen and Gale for being a part of this webinar and for sharing their knowledge and expertise with our audience today. Please make sure to leave questions for them both. I am going to hand it over to Gale and Jen to get us started.
Everyone, welcome. I'm Gale Schwartz, Director of Program and Policy, Program and Outreach at the Housing Alliance, and I am joined by Jen Thomas, the Community Engagement Manager. Wait, I'm a little tongue-tied this morning. My apologies. We all thrive when everyone has a safe, stable place to call home. Home is the foundation where we build our lives, nurture our families, and strengthen our communities. A decent, affordable home helps people stay connected to work, support children's learning and growth, maintain physical and mental well-being, and put down roots that strengthen the neighborhoods we all share. Each of us has a role to play in lifting up the stories of hope, resilience, and transformation that show exactly why the programs that you all work for matter. When we share these stories of stability gained, of opportunities unlocked, and of communities strengthened, we help shape the narrative and the future. Our voices can educate not just elected officials in Washington and Harrisburg, but our neighbors, our local leaders, and our local government. Together, we can build understanding, inspire action, and protect existing and create new resources that help people find and keep a place to call home. So, you know who we are. I just want to take a moment to get a sense of who all of you are in the room with us today. So, how many housing providers do we have? Direct service nonprofits, community action agencies, community-based organizations, any other policy and advocacy organizations, local government, foundation, or funders. Just going to give it a few more seconds. I think we can end the poll and share our results. So we got a lot of housing providers in the room, a lot of direct service nonprofits and CAP agencies. So thank you all so much for joining. So nonprofit organizations that help low-income and housing insecure families help those folks move towards their goals are doing remarkable work every day. and they rely on strong, consistent public investments and needed legislative changes to keep that progress going. Our goal for today's conversation is to equip nonprofits with the confidence, tools, and understanding they need to engage meaningfully with their elected officials about the public investments and regulatory decisions that shape their work and the lives of the people that they serve. So our learning objectives for today is to do a little bit of just level setting about what advocacy is, how advocacy is different than lobbying, share some tools and tactics, go over storytelling and nonpartisan voter engagement. So we have another question for you all. We want to make this as interactive as possible. So how many of you know if you can advocate? And it's okay if you don't. Great. It looks like most of the folks joining us today can advocate, which is excellent. For those who are not sure, we'll be sure to, hopefully you will walk away having some clarity around that. So what is advocacy? And it's essentially public support for or a recommendation of a particular cause or policy. Why advocacy matters. Advocacy amplifies your mission beyond direct services. It shapes systems and policies for long-term changes, ensures decision makers understand community needs. So let's get into advocacy versus lobbying. I think, sometimes people talk about reasons they can't advocate. They don't know if they're allowed, if they have, maybe it's a time constraint. Everybody is so busy right now. They're not sure of how much impact it really has. So today we really want to show how to stay, of course, compliant with any lobbying and advocacy regulations, but also how to integrate just small actions and activities that can really be focused in to have some strong impacts at those like key strategic moments. So nonprofit versus advocacy versus lobbying. Here are some of the main points, right? This is information that is geared towards nonprofit. We just want to remind people that, that the information is geared towards nonprofits that we're presenting today. And it's about the rules and regulations that pertain to whether nonprofits can lobby. This isn't going to carry over to any rules around those of you that work for local government or those that work for-profit agencies. So what does it even mean to be a 501c3 nonprofit, that tax status? So the 501c3 tax status is a federally recognized charitable nonprofit. That means that those organizations are exempt from income tax, they can receive tax deductible donations, and they must follow specific rules around political activity. So it's the IRS that determines whether or not an organization can claim to be a 501c3, and it is the IRS that's going to provide the rules on the limitations to lobbying. But those rules, for the most part, are generally vague. But this can be a good thing. I think it works well in our favor that they're vague. So I just want to do another quick quiz, and this time we're just going to have folks answer through the chat. What can nonprofits do? Can they talk to candidates for public office? Can they support or tell others to support a candidate for public office? Can nonprofits meet with an elected official? Can they talk about the impact of a specific federal program like CDBG, homelessness assistance grants, the Housing Choice Voucher Program? Let's give folks another second. Just put A, B, C, or D in the chat. And the answer is B. Support or tell others to support what a candidate can do. And this is what nonprofits cannot do. As a nonprofit or a person affiliated with a nonprofit, you can't tell people that you're supporting a particular candidate for public office. And you can't tell others to support a candidate for public office. But you can absolutely talk to candidates. You can invite candidates to view your programs and to have conversations about the issues. So it really is focusing on the good work that you are doing to support families facing housing insecurity and receiving your services. Here's our next quiz question. The IRS limits how much of the following a nonprofit can do. Is it A, education, B, advocacy, C, lobbying, D, support of a candidate for public office? So again, put A, B, C, or D. You can have more than one answer, check all that apply, and go ahead and put that into the chat. I'll give you another few seconds.
Gail, you accidentally muted yourself.
That.
There you
Okay.
go.
All right. The IRS does limit, as we already talked about, D, which is which is about supporting candidates for public office. And also, again, there are the limits around lobbying, but we're going to talk about that more. But just remember, though, that in your capacity as a person or an individual and on your own personal time, you can absolutely support a candidate for public office. You just have to make sure that you are not noting your support has any relevance to your position working for a nonprofit. And then the IRS does have some guidelines limiting how much lobbying a nonprofit can do. So another thing we really want to point out, nonprofit advocacy versus lobbying. Advocacy is kind of just a synonym for education. And so if you really do feel a little bit uncomfortable with advocacy, just call it education. And again, remember that you're focusing on the issues and the work that you are doing and not necessarily trying to tell a public official what they should be doing or supporting a candidate. Nonprofits can educate about the impact of federal programs on your work in communities. If you are talking about the importance of the Community Development Block Grant, for example, you might be in a meeting at the same time that the appropriations bill is being considered. But as long as you don't refer to the appropriations bill, it's not lobbying, it's just education or advocacy. Another main point is, how can you, here's how to explain that you are educating and not lobbying. So lobbying is expressing support or opposition for a specific bill and naming that bill number or title. What I'm doing is educating. I'm explaining the impact that this federal program has on our worker community. This is a phrase that we encourage you to use and put into your talking points to help make sure that you are framing the conversation as solely about education and information sharing. And there's absolutely no limit to how much nonprofits can educate elected officials about the impact of particular programs, and you can name the particular program. So we have another quiz. This one's just true or false. Again, answer in the chat. Lobbying is recommending that an elected official support or oppose a specific bill. So again, just type true or false, or just even put T or F. We'll give it another few seconds. I see folks are entering in the chat. That's great. And the answer is that it's true. Lobbying is recommending to an elected official or recommending that an elected official support or oppose a specific bill. As we're talking about limiting on lobbying, it's important to understand what the actual definition of lobbying is. And so this is the actual definition of lobbying. Again, recommending that an elected official support or oppose a specific bill. And, we've mentioned that the IRS does indicate that there is a limitation on how much lobbying you are doing. But once we explain it a little bit more, you're going to find that it is so vague that it is really hardly limiting at all. So what the IRS says is that a nonprofit can spend a substantial part of their time and resources on lobbying. And obviously, hardly anyone, not even us at the Housing Alliance, are spending a substantial part of our time specifically on lobbying. The IRS says nonprofits can't spend a substantial part of time and resources on lobbying, but substantial is undefined. Most organizations, including us, are nowhere near that threshold. So another way to think about it is, are we doing more lobbying than the Housing Alliance? If you're not, then you're in a good place. And we do a lot of conversations with legislators and elected officials, but again, it does not make up, this substantial part of our work. Our next quiz. If your organization is mostly federally funded and there is no other funding source, you may be limited in how much of the following you can do. A, education, B, lobbying. Again, just an audience question, put it into the chat. And again, lobbying. This is really just to get into some of the nuances. So some organizations are mostly federally funding, but the only limitation is on how much lobbying you can do. Every federal grant that I've seen, or even some other philanthropic grants, you often have to sign a piece of paper that says that none of the funding that you receive will be used for lobbying. But just again, remember that there's a big difference between education and lobbying. Our next quiz. Only money influences decisions of elected officials. True or false? Again, just put this in the chat. You can just even put a T or a F. Only money can influence the decision of elected officials. And the answer to that is false. People power does matter. And when we show up in large numbers, our elected officials absolutely do take notice. So that's why it's so important for all of us to engage when we can. So we know that nonprofits absolutely can lobby. So why do so many think that they can't? And there could be other reasons that are preventing people from educating and lobbying, right? There is that question about whether or not you're allowed. It could be a capacity issue. There's simply no time. And there could be skepticism. Are you sure that your phone call or the one pager that you send to your local congressman is really going to work? And we're going to address all three with low lift tactics and examples that do work. So here are some tools and tactics just to help get you started. You can host site visits. And this is just inviting your local elected officials, your members of Congress, your state representatives to come and see a program in action. Again, this is prepping a one-pager that shows your impact, your outcomes, the difference that you're making in your community, and includes some client stories. So you're backing up the data with some human interest information and anecdotes that really are far better at staying in somebody's memory than numbers alone. They're sharing resources. You can send a quarterly issue brief to offices of elected officials. And you can even add a segment if you're somebody who puts out a regular newsletter. You could respond to alerts, right? Pick one or two coalition partners to follow, like us, the Housing Alliance. And maybe you could have somebody on your team that is designated to respond to sign-ons and action alerts. We're the Housing Alliance. We definitely put out action alerts and do all of that. But we also receive action alerts from our national partners. And I'm the person on staff who oftentimes is going to be that first responder and sign us on to things that we are going to support. Engage in research. Say yes to surveys and focus groups that help shape guidance and funding priorities. Jen's going to talk about that some more. We definitely do a lot of those focus groups and listening sessions so that we can convey that information to the elected officials that we engage with. And of course, leverage your networks. You're clearly a part of the Housing Alliance network if you're joining us today, but there's also national networks that are really great to work with, and even some local groups. You can always borrow their tools and timelines so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Another audience question. Let's see, we are looking at whether you are in Harrisburg, in district, in DC. What are the ways that you have engaged in advocacy activities? Have you ever called your elected official, attended a meeting with an elected official or their staff, responded to an action alert from the Housing Alliance or another coalition that you're a part of? Participate in voter engagement? Share a personal story or your lived experience, even attending a public meeting, hearing, or listening session. So we're just going to give folks another few seconds to answer. And you can choose more than one answer. All right, Jen, if you want to go ahead and show the results. We see a lot of folks are attending public meetings and definitely making those calls and having those meetings with their elected officials. And so with that, I'm going to pass it over to Jen, who's going to talk about changing hearts and minds through storytelling.
Thank you so much, Gale. Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here in this space with all of you today. As Gale said, I'm Jen Thomas, and I'm the Community Engagement Manager here at the Housing Alliance. I'm just going to share my screens. Just one second, please. And then if I can get a confirmation from my co-panelist. Okay, great. Awesome. So yeah, I'm going to talk about just one of those tools that you have in your advocacy toolbox here, which is really, I believe, one of our most powerful tools, and that is storytelling. Storytelling shows the human impact behind policy and programs. It True advocacy demands an emotional connection that compels people to care and to act. And this is why storytelling really does become one of your most vital assets. People are moved to action based on how they feel. That's what sticks with them, as Gail mentioned previously. So I'm just going to go over some storytelling for advocacy best practices here. Right off the bat, we recommend being personal. Start with a story that feels really real and close to home. Sharing an example from your work or your community that connects directly to the policy issue you're advocating for. Like I said, these personal stories stick with legislators far longer than statistics alone. Stories help find common ground. Remember, you don't have to agree on everything to have a conversation about something, but when you focus in on those shared values, like wanting safe, stable communities, opportunities for families, efficient use of public resources, that really helps find that value alignment and that builds trust. Always keep things focused and brief. Aim for one clear story that shows both the problem and the solution. When we're meeting with legislators or their staff, we recommend that your story is kept to about a minute to 3 minutes so there's time for conversation. You may also be in a group with people and might not have a lot of time to share. So you really want to be able to get all your points across quickly so that you can pass the mic and let everybody share their story. And that simplicity within your story really helps land your message. Inspire, don't overwhelm. A lot of the messaging research that's being done at a national level has found that when you lead with emotions like hope and pride, empowerment, just love for your community, these emotions really move people to action. When we lean too heavily on anger and fear or sadness, it really can shut the conversation down before it even starts. It makes the problem you're trying to address feel almost unfixable or unsolvable. So, leaning on those emotions that open the conversation really do help build trust and help your story land. Not to say not to use fear and anger or sadness, but use care with that and maybe don't open with that. And then something that's not listed on this slide, but I think it's really important to note is you don't have to become an expert, just be authentic. The most powerful advocacy comes from your lived experience with your work or your personal life and just that genuine care for the people that you serve. I know a lot of people get stuck here. On my first Capitol Hill day, I was so focused on memorizing every detail of the policy that I almost missed the main point of why I was there. And what really mattered the most wasn't perfect talking points. It was sharing things about how I knew how eviction and housing instability impacted my own life and how federal programs made a difference. And once I did that, the conversation opened up. It created a shared understanding and invited that legislator into the story in a way that just regurgitating the policy points really wouldn't have done. And we've seen that with advocates in spaces a lot. Telling that personal story, finding that value or that shared experience really opens that conversation up. So, telling the story. So, I'm going to just share an example of a recent campaign that we did at the Housing Alliance for federal programs last fall and winter. We sent out a very specific framework for stories. These were the prompts that we shared, and folks signed up to share stories and answer these questions. And that's something we can do at the Housing Alliance is help you with that story framework, that messaging framework. And you could send us bullet points, and we will help craft that into a story and use it for advocacy with your permission. So I'm going to share an example of one of the stories we got. Um, what we did with these stories is we told the story, we turned them into one-pagers, we connected it back to the program, and then connected it back to our larger ask. So this is about a rapid rehousing program, which does more than just help with rent. It provides case management, referrals, and a supportive environment for healing. So right away, the reader of this story knows what the program does, and the storyteller paints a very human-centered image. They talk about that even though the parent was working and attending college part-time, without support, they really wouldn't have been able to get out of their abusive situation. They wouldn't have been able to secure that safe, stable housing. So it's really showing that stability isn't just about effort, it's about having access to resources and a safe place to live. What really makes this story strong is how it shows the whole picture of stability, not just rent, but safety, emotional support, and long-term planning. The children here had a safe place to heal, and the parent was able to set goals and achieve them. It really makes the story multi-dimensional and paints a picture in the reader's mind. They then share the transformation. Today, the family is in a stable home, the parent earned their degree, and they're financially secure. And then it connects back to the advocacy. The story is a clear example of why these programs matter. They don't just put a roof over someone's head, they provide a foundation for a safer, stronger future. So after the reader has the story, they then get a little snippet of what the program is that helped on the one-pagers. And then it connected back to our ask. So we're calling on Congress to fully fund HUD housing, community development, and homeless assistance programs to prevent currently served families from losing their homes. We made about 9 or 10 of these with stories we collected. They're all on our website, and they were all sent to our federal representatives and senators. So I encourage you to check that out. And if you have a story that you want turned into a one-pager, please reach out to us. We're always happy to help with that. So sometimes you're not going to have a super specific framework like the one I just shared. So this tool, Building a Story of Self, is really, really helpful for not just crafting your own story, but helping other people develop their own. So this story helps you really map out those advocacy goals, starting with who your audience is, what the value is that you share, so where that value intersection comes in, and then a real life example that shows the challenge and the solution, and then it ties back into the call to action. We will be sharing these slides and these tools. This comes from the Housing Narrative Lab, which is a really good resource on messaging for housing solutions. I recommend checking it out. So, if you're working on collecting stories for advocacy, there's definitely some best practices that we follow here at the Housing Alliance and that are recommended from national partners. And that is building trust and relationships first. Storytelling shouldn't feel transactional. Making sure somebody is in a safe place and is ready to share. Reliving their experience can be emotional. So, timing and sensitivity really do matter here. Ownership and agency. The storyteller should always control how their story is shared, whether that's public, anonymous, limited to certain audiences. And then consent isn't just a one-time checkbox. It should be informed, ongoing, enthusiastic. People should feel like they can say yes and no at any stage. People should be able to say, you know what, I put my story out there. You used it for this, but that's all I wanted to use it for. And that is absolutely okay. Um, Providing training and coaching and mentorship is a big part of storytelling. So we have been doing focus groups here at the Housing Alliance for many years now, where we talk to folks with lived experience with eviction. And something we have incorporated into those focus groups is a storytelling training. So people can feel comfortable sharing their story in public spaces or just craft their story as a way to put it out there, even if it's never used. So, in addition to having the focus groups, we do that training. And then we do ongoing contacts with them if they would like to, and always let folks know how their story is going to be used. And then, yeah, always close the loop. Let people know how their story was used. That just builds trust for the future. And then, if possible, offer compensation for time and expertise if you're able to do that at your organization. So, another topic that's very near and dear to my heart is voter engagement and education. And this is something that many of you might already be doing, have thought about doing. We know that advocacy is ultimately about shaping systems. And one of the most powerful systems we can influence is our democracy. So, For nonprofits, voter engagement shouldn't feel like an extra thing. It often could be very mission aligned work that helps ensure your communities that you're serving have a voice in the decisions that are shaping their lives. Policy change really does start with who's at the table. One of my favorite quotes I heard was, "If you're not at the table, you're on the menu." And often elected officials will make decisions about funding and programs and housing and health care. So you really want to be at that table when these decisions are being made. So helping residents register and turn out to vote can strengthen that collected voice. Um, it is nonpartisan work. So um, just like advocacy and lobbying, you should remain nonpartisan. Voter engagement and education is nonpartisan as long as you're not endorsing a candidate. So handing out voter registration, helping people register, posting flyers and signs in your common areas. These are all ways that you can engage in this work, and is completely allowable for 501(c)(3)s. And then it really just helps deepen trust and relationships with your community. You know, when organizations are helping individuals navigate voting, it really signals your voice matters here. People remember who showed up for them, and that's what can really strengthen your advocacy base over time. And then policymakers respond to engaged communities. Communities with higher turnout get more attention, resources, and responsiveness. So when nonprofits can increase participation among historically underrepresented voters, they really shift whose voices guide policy. And then it also reinforces your mission, regardless of whether your mission is housing, healthcare, environment, youth, arts, policy impacts your work. So empowering your community to vote is one of the most direct ways you can advance your mission. So what can this look like for nonprofits? Voter registration, education, turnout reminders, sharing nonpartisan resources on how to fill out your mail-in ballot or how to return your mail-in ballot or what are important dates that you should put on your calendar. We really strongly encourage that you integrate voting into what you already do. You don't have to come up with a whole new um, campaign or hire new staff. If you're having a community event, set up a table that has some information on voter registration and have someone there who can maybe answer questions and walk people through the process. And these are things that the Housing Alliance can help you with as far as resources go, education. So if you are interested in any of this work and bringing it into your organization, reach out to me. I'd love to be a resource for you. And just to show you a little bit about like what we did in 2024. Um, so we engaged about 37 partners across the state, and these were housing providers, housing authorities, local service providers to bring this nonpartisan voter engagement directly to people. We supported them through giving resources and materials. And in 2024, just 53.4% of lower income voting eligible adults um, turned out. But when we were able to see that the folks were engaged, we had 83% of those individuals talked to show up and turn out to vote. So this outcome really does highlight how low lift relationship focused strategies can help people overcome obstacles and turn out to vote. So, like I said, if you're interested in this work, please reach out to me. My contact information is here, and we can also share it later. And then we are doing a series of policy webinars. So if there are issues that you're particularly passionate about or would like to know more about, please sign up. Registration is open for the first one listed here, and the other two registrations will be coming out soon. And we'll be talking about ways you can get involved with advocacy during those webinars. And then remember, advocacy is a muscle that needs work. It takes time. It's all about relationship building, and measure success beyond immediate wins. If you've positioned yourself as a resource to your elected official or their staff, that's great. That's progress. Um, and just like with everything else, practice makes perfect. So with that, we do want to give an update on the Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development Bill. So the final FY26 bill represents a significant all increase for HUD programs. Rental assistance and homelessness programs were largely protected with enough funding to renew existing vouchers and support COC programs. There was an increase in tenant protection vouchers, which help prevent households from losing assistance. And then the House is expected to vote soon, and the Senate will be considering the bill next week ahead of the January 30th continuing resolution deadline. So we do have an action for you today. But I do want to note that these increases that we were able to get is thanks to the hard work of advocates around the country who reached out to their members of Congress repeatedly over the past couple months and made their voices heard to protect funding for these vital programs. So this really does show that it works, and we need to continue reaching out. It doesn't stop here. So we created an action alert for you, and I'm going to just show you how our system works real quickly. So if you click on the link, which Chris is going to put in the chat and we'll send out afterwards, you're going to get taken to this page that explains what the action alert is here. And then you simply put in your street address and your zip code and you hit go. And then that opens up a calling script. The contact information is already there. You can read over the script. You can add your own stuff into the script. We just want to give you every tool we can to make this low lift for you. And then once you're done calling, just check I called, and we'll be able to see how many people called and how many advocates talked to their elected officials and be able to say, look, we had this many people do this and look at this outcome. So the link is in the chat to do that. That is your homework for today. And we will keep everybody updated on how the bill progresses through the House and the Senate and if things change. But I believe, going back to the slides, that's all for me. These are just some more resources on advocacy that we recommend you checking out. And then here's our contact information. We would love to hear from you. And we have about 5 minutes left for some questions.
We don't have any questions in the Q&A box, but if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, feel free to put them in the Q&A box, and we can get to them. While we wait for folks' questions, I just wanted to say, Jen mentioned this before, but we will send out a recording of this webinar and then all the materials that were presented, including the slides, within a week of today. So keep an eye out for that. There will also be a survey that pops up once this webinar ends. It's just about your experience with this webinar. It'll take you less than a minute. So we would greatly appreciate it if you could take that as well. Do we have any questions?
Not seeing any.
Oh, I
Thanks,
do
Mel.
see a question. Has this been answered? No. It's from Alana, who says, any update on the state housing action plan? Wasn't there a report that was supposed to be released end of 25th or early Jan? I remember that being teased at the Homes Within Reach conference, a Homes Within Reach attendee.
Yes. We were hoping to see the housing action plan. I think, right now conversation is really focusing on the upcoming budget address. And we're hoping that, those two events will play off of each other. So all of this is to say we don't exactly know when the housing action plan is going to be released, but hopefully soon. And we most certainly will be sharing it out on our network as soon as it is released.
You, Gale. We have 2 more minutes left. If anyone has a question they want to squeeze in.
Well, I hope the reason we're not getting a lot of questions is because you're already clicking open that action alert and making those calls to your members of Congress. With that, if we don't have any questions, let's just give everybody a minute back. And thank you so much for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you at the next one.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
So much. Bye, everyone.